Good evening, viewers. Welcome to Speaker's Gallery. Our guest today is Dr. David Ndii. Dr. David Ndii is a renowned scholar. He's an economist who has worked for the World Bank in addition to a lot of other responsibilities that he has held in this country. He's also a columnist, and he's also a very powerful commentator on economic matters in the country. Dr. David Ndii, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Farah.
Give us a small rundown of your own history, where you came from, where you were born, when you were born, and how you came to be what you are today. And take maybe a few minutes to do that.
Really?
Yes.
My story is very uncomplicated.
Yes.
It's very typical Kenyan.
Yes.
Of my generation, because I actually grew up not far away from here, because I'm from Kiambu.
Okay.
So, and my parents were sort of public servants. My mother was an education officer. So I spent my youth sort of in moving from one neighborhood to another, not within Kiambu. So I lived in Kiamba, spent most of my growing up in Tigoni, and then some of it in Githunguri, but my home is actually in Limuru. That's why
You call home?
I call home, yeah. That's where my parents actually settled down. Lari and Limuru. We originated from Lari. So very typical Kenyan upbringing,
Where did you go to school?
I went to Nyahururu High School, a school in Nyandarua for my O-levels. Then went to Kangaroo School for my A-levels, where I went to school with people like Adan Mohammed. I think he was a year my junior. Governor Mohammed Kuti was a year my senior. Abdullahi Wako, who was MP for Mandera at some point.
Yes. He was Isiolo South.
Okay.
Yes, the Dr. Abdullahi Wako, the pharmacist.
The tall guy,
Yes.
He was my schoolmate. So quite a lot of Kenyans.
And the late Dr. Benaya Godana, many years before
that,
and of course,
also in Kangaroo School.
Stephen Kalonzo Msioka.
Yeah, lots of very good school, by the way. I have great,
premier school.
Very fond memories of Kangaroo School. University of Nairobi, did BA in I studied economics, mathematics, and linguistics. Then did the masters in economics.
Quite a mixture. Economics, mathematics, understandable, but the linguistics again.
Linguistics is actually very analytical.
Yes.
I was always a very analytical person.
Yes.
So I actually speak fairly good German. I speak many languages, like 20%, but I speak fairly good German. And then I did a master's in economics at the University of Nairobi as well, which I graduated in 1990. Because I joined in 95, we lost a year because of the coup attempt. Joined in 95, did my undergrad, finished in 88, went back for a master's.
No, 85, sorry.
Joined in 85.
Yes.
Finished in 88. And then went back for masters. Finished in 90. So in 1990, when the multi-party business was starting.
That's when we met.
That's when we met, yeah. That's when I had just finished. I had actually got a job with the World Bank. I was working with the World Bank office here in Nairobi. And of course, things started, 91.
Yes.
Having been sort of quite student activist in a way, I also jumped into the fray. But what I think really defines where I went from there was that we got involved in an effort to help the opposition at the time as intellectuals and sort of professionals to do a manifesto. Remember, we had not had...
Technocrats, yes, I remember
technocrats, yeah, we hadn't had an opposition before. So I was actually drafted in by Robert Shaw and Professor Nyang Nyong to help with the economic policy stuff on the manifesto, which then became the Post-Election Action Program.
Yes.
We lost.
Incidentally, before you go forward, I remember the Post-Election Action Program.
Yeah.
We did that before the elections.
Yes.
But the presumption was that we were going to win.
We were going to win, yes.
So we were in government.
Yes.
We assumed we were going to be in government. And then that will be the action plan we're going to implement in government.
Exactly. So in fact, I think the writing was already, because remember when we started doing it, Ford was together.
Yes.
By the time we finished,
split up.
Ford had split up. DP had come onto the scene. And all sorts of things. Kibaki had then left and come into the DP. And we had a deal that we were going to run on one platform. But the day we were launching PIP, at Serena.
Yes.
I remember very well.
Absolutely.
Only Jaramogi turned up.
Yeah.
From the other part. If the other luminaries did not turn up.
Yes.
So I think the writing was beginning to be on the wall. Yes. That something the opposition wasn't really holding together.
Lost, yeah.
So then after that, then what happened then is we then lost. Opposition went to parliament. And I remember having a conversation with, I think, Anyang and Robert as well. Robert used to write a lot for the newspapers, and so we used to interact a lot. Yes. And thinking, okay, now that we've lost, we are in opposition. The opposition also did not have the analytical capacity to be able to be effective in parliament. So we came up with this idea of institutionalizing what we had done to produce the
resources for members of parliament.
To create a resource center for the member of parliament.
Yes.
And that's what became the Institute of Economic Affairs.
Yes.
So before I left off to go for my further studies in 93.
In Oxford.
In Oxford, yeah. Yes. So I took some time off early, and I spent July, August, and September of 93 setting up the Institute of Economic Affairs.
Yes, I remember that very well.
So setting up the Institute of Economic Affairs then meant I sort of became very much involved. Even when I went away, I became very much involved in the business of how to strengthen the opposition in terms of its performing its roles in parliament, oversight, and all sorts of things. So particularly budget oversight. Over the years, IEA went through quite a bit of process growing up. I think I came back, took a break in 96 or 97 because it was sort of struggling. Helped to revamp it. And then we recruited, I persuaded Betty Minor, who is now a PS, to come on board.
Before that, I remember we had Wachira Maina.
Yeah, what happened, when I was leaving, I could not find an economist who was willing to take the job because it was very risky. And most economists had association with government. So, because that's where economists worked before. So I remember I was talking to Paul Muite and told him I can't find somebody to take over this institution we've set up, and I'm leaving. And Paul is the one who proposed to Wachira.
Wachira Maina.
Wachira Maina.
He was a lawyer, of course.
Wachira is a lawyer. He's a very young lawyer. He had edited Nairobi Law Monthly. So he already had run-ins with the state. So although he wasn't an economist, and he was a very smart guy, he'd just come back with a master's from Columbia. We hit it off right away.
Yes. And he did a good job.
And he was the right guy. I mean, he hit it off right away. And but after a while, he wanted to go and do more of his stuff, his legal governance sort of things. So they went off and set up something else called CGD, Center for Governance and Development, which also did a very good job. I remember one of the things they did was an analysis of Auditor General's reports for many years and showing how much money
was lost,
what we had lost, even those days. So we started becoming a sort of fraternity of young sort of technocrat activists. Maina Kiai had set up Kenya Human Rights Commission in the US with the help of Mutunga and
Dr.
Macau Mutua. So we sort of formed a community of sort of young intellectuals and technocrats who were supporting the opposition.
Do you miss those days? I mean, I was in Parliament that time. We were only 33 from Fort Kenya, which was the only party that had representation right across the board from all the 8 provinces of Kenya then. And we were able to do such a fine job in holding the government accountable, and debates were so powerful those days. When you look at Parliament today, and you look at it those days, with the institutions that were there, the Institute of Economic Affairs, Center for Governance and Democracy, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and the Maina Kiai, and you look at all that. Gitobi Manyara, who had his own
monthly, and
was doing very
good job. Yes.
We had the society with
Yamora, yes.
Yeah, and when you look at those ones, you look back, don't you get fairly nostalgic?
Sort of. I think, first of all, I think I am actually more when I look back,
Yes.
I am amazed at what we were able to do.
Yes.
With so
under
little.
those circumstances.
Under those circumstances,
Yes.
with so little.
Yes.
We were very young, many of us. We were inexperienced.
Yes.
Even those people who, we had very little resources.
Yeah.
But we were able, remember, even the constitutional reform initiative started, it started from there. I remember going to a workshop organized by something which was then Willy Mutunga and Kivutha Kibwana, Gibson Kamau Korea, and all were sort of beginning to start. And that's what then became the NCEC. And that's what pushed for made constitutional reform a political agenda. So I think the fact that we were able to sustain that multi-party momentum, agitation for human rights and all sorts of things, opening up the political space throughout that period, that I think is something that I think is remarkable.
Very remarkable, yes.
What then, of course, things then really went wrong after the fallout on the MOU.
Yes.
That's when really the rain really started beating us again. Not the first time, but again. So after
that was in 2002.
No, 4.
2004.
No, because the election was 2003.
Yes, no, 2002 was the election.
Yes, 2003.
Beginning of 2003.
Beginning of 2003. Through to 2004 and the referendum, the first referendum in 2005. So I think that's when the trajectory now towards, I guess, joining what is now being called in the world as a democratic recession. That's when our trajectory began. And I think I am actually probably very sanguine about it. I don't think it's all lost. I think under the circumstances, I think we can actually sort of, we made good account of ourselves at the time. And I think what I sometimes struggle with psychologically is the fact that it looks like, we're going to live a life of political struggle all our lives. And the question that you ask yourself is, why do these people put us through this? Yeah? Why does a small group of people, this post-colonial status quo, elite, Kenyatta and company, why do they put us through all of this?
When you look back at it, I want to remind you, initially we got into a situation in which we had a coalition government in 2003. And some of the luminaries in the struggle, the so-called young Turks, were given positions of prominence in the government. They became ministers. Much later also, when we had the coalition government under Kibaki as the president and Rila Odinga as a prime minister, we literally filled the ranks. But we didn't do any different from what the Moi government used to do. Corruption was as rampant, nepotism, and all the ills that the Kanu government had also reared its ugly face during that time. So what happened? Are we using our own intellectual prowess right now and the eloquence and the ability to understand and read the problems and try and hoodwink Kenyans so that when we get into positions of prominence, we do it exactly the way the other ones were doing? So it's just a question of fighting to have your chance to eat, if you want to call it very crude language, or there is no what you call a deep-seated conviction that you have to bring about a change. It doesn't matter whether you come out of it yourself with no wealth like Nyerere did. Are we lacking those kind of honesties? Are we lacking those inbuilt integrities? Because we have had changes and we haven't seen changes.
It's a social problem. There's a Nigerian political scientist, Peter Eke, who wrote a paper many years ago, which I really like. It's called the Problem of the Two Publics, Characterization of Post-Colonial Africa. And really it reflects that the character of the post-colonial elite in Africa, and you see it playing out, because it is a product of the colonial system. Yeah, it was produced by colonialism. And colonialism, one of the things it did is to subjugate the legitimate leadership that existed, the traditional leadership. Okay? And then it elevated these people who it created. And if you look at the people who joined the colonial system, they were some progressive, but many opportunists. But the one thing they lack is they lack legitimacy. They lack what Peter Eke calls a legitimating ideology, which is sort of authentic. I put it to, it's actually a problem of political culture and a predicament of the post-colonial African elite, or bourgeois, as these author calls them. So there's a Nigerian political scientist. His name is Peter Eke. He wrote a paper a long time ago in the 70s, which calls the problem of the two publics. And it's a sort of a theoretical statement about post-colonial Africa. And the point he's making is that if you look at the people you're calling this leadership and progressive elite, they were actually a product of colonialism. And one of the things that colonialism did is to subjugate the traditional authority, the traditional political authority. So what it created is these people, and these people's biggest preoccupation is their own personal social mobility within this post-colonial system. That's what the colonial system did. It took a bunch of people because they went to school and adopted Christianity and sort of were good boys to the white man. They went up this new social ladder. So if you look at them, they are very preoccupied. It's a system whose really main purpose is provide social mobility for people. Yeah, they fix people. That's why people fighting to get in it.
And show the differentials.
Yes, and differentiate people. It's create these classes. Yeah, so people will do anything. They are not authentic leaders of the people. Because the authentic leadership of the people was subjugated. So you find these people, and that's Peter Eke's theory, that on the one hand, they are sort of this post-colonial elite, but on the other hand,
they have the credentials.
Yes. On the other hand, they
yes.
want traditional, they want legitimacy among the people. So you find they're very schizophrenic. One day they are trying to please white people in town and in international conferences, and the other day they are trying to be accepted by the villagers. They are wearing traditional things and becoming crowned as elders yes, and all manner of things. So there is that cultural dislocation. I think that's the correct phrase. You're talking about a culturally dislocated society. So what it means is that their legitimation ideology, as political sociologists call it, is this thing they call development.
Yes.
Yeah? That the only thing they can offer the people is not political leadership.
It's goodies.
It's goodies. They can only offer goodies.
Water, roads.
Yes. If they are not delivering goodies, they have no claim to leadership.
Yes.
But if you look at traditional leadership and traditional authority, it does not offer goodies.
It actually used to take goodies.
It actually used to take goodies from the people. Common people would bring them as presents and things.
To the Libons and the
chiefs. To the Libons and the chiefs and the Asantehenes, if you go to Ghana.
Yes.
What are they? So there is an organic traditional system of leadership.
Yes.
You don't have to bend over backwards promising people all manner of things, because you just somebody who has been elevated as part of in a traditional political system. So what the predicament then becomes is you've got these good people, they have got good intentions, but they too are prisoners of this thing I call developmentalism. They go there, and instead of because they don't offer any leadership. So they are now looking for resources, for money from donors, from honorable people, because everybody is only competing in this development space. Developmentalist, I will call it, because it's not real development.
Where did we go wrong and Tanzania went right? For example, Julius Nyerere, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, selfless person who had not a coin in his account when he left the place. Actually, the people of Tanzania had to contribute for him.
Yeah.
Magufuli, who had less than $1 million, the equivalent of $1 million Kenyan shillings when he came to office, and who comes from the smallest tribe in Tanzania, who did not have to call on his big tribe. Where did we go wrong and they went right?
There is actually a pattern.
Yes.
If you look at the few successful African nations,
yes,
and I call them not just economically successful, but they are,
yes,
but they are also politically
Frankly,
successful.
I can't think of any other than Tanzania and probably Botswana.
There are quite a number. There's Botswana, Namibia is getting there. There's a little country called Cape Verde. There's Mauritius. There's Seychelles.
Indeed, yes.
Seychelles is actually Africa's only high-income country. And you're beginning to see Senegal moving in that direction. So there is a handful of African countries which are politically successful. And they are also, interestingly, becoming the more economically successful.
Most likely Ethiopia is also...
No, it's not. Ethiopia is actually got very serious problems.
Yes.
If you look at their characteristics, they are all democracies. And they are all small. And their founding fathers, so to speak, if you talk about their founding fathers, focused on political development. Because we recognized that these colonial entities were not nations. Okay? These colonial entities...
They strived to create a nation.
So they realized that the first job of the leadership is to create a nation. Nyerere, that's recognized that. That if you ask what's the difference with Tanzania, it's about...
It's a big country.
It's the only big country
in that club
in which the leadership recognized that the first order of business is to create a nation. Ours took it for granted that a nation will happen.
Emerge.
Because we have gotten independence. But because they were so immersed in this colonial materialism, they did not have the intellectual depth to reflect and ask themselves, what have we inherited? What do we need to do with it? If you look at the places where that question was asked, I think in Nyerere, you look at Senegal, Senghor, these were also African sort of philosopher kings.
Yes.
They were quite intellectual. So they were reflecting deeply.
Disposition.
Yeah, they were reflecting deeply on these matters. Kenyatta was a pseudo-intellectual. He did not reflect deeply, and I think he was overwhelmed by just material sort of appetites. That lot, he was overwhelmed by their appetites. So
and that goes also for his cabinet and
the whole lot.
The whole lot, yes.
The whole lot. And I think it is more severe problem in settler colonies. Because in settler colonies, the whites were there. They had these lifestyles. You know, you had the colonial, we had the colonial lifestyle. So people with material sort of appetite for consumption
and for good things in life.
In settler colonies, it was there. So they got very greedy. They even today, by the way you see it in them, they can't control their appetites. You know, in Zimbabwe, you saw the same thing in Zimbabwe. You're seeing the same thing in South Africa. Okay.
Talking of intellectuals who had the depth, I say, and a few people also in Kenya say, many people in Kenya say that actually the best president we've had in this country was Mwai Kibaki. And some would go further and credit that with the fact that he was an A student in his throughout his education, all the way to, and he probably gave us more growth over that short period of time than we would ever expect in the next 20 years or 30 years' time.
It's a difficult
notwithstanding the fact that
proposition.
Because he was part of a culture who could not be that divorced from that
I look
culture.
at it this way.
Yes.
Kibaki was actually a product of that multi-party
Yes.
trajectory. I don't think he made himself. We made him.
Yes.
He was an agent of necessity.
Yes.
And remember, he was actually a reluctant.
Yes. President.
No, I don't think he was a reluctant president. He was a reluctant convert to multi-party.
Yes.
He was the last man to leave KANU.
The Mugumo tree.
The Mugumo tree.
Yes.
He was a reluctant Democrat.
Yes.
Progressive. So, but in 2003, he was an agent of necessity. We needed somebody we could all agree on.
Rally
around. Moi had chosen Uhuru. We were scared. We were concerned about the Kikuyu vote going that route. So the pragmatic choice
was to get another
Kikuyu, so that we do not have the ethnic polarization in that election. And that is, in fact, I think our only election that did not have that ethnic polarization. The thing is, so given his character and how he came to power, I think that trajectory, the economic trajectory, was actually a product of that. But he himself, it helped that he did not have personal insecurities, yeah, like his successor and predecessor.
Yes.
So that helped. But I
because
think
we as far as infrastructure is concerned, I think we hit
I think we could have done better economically, by the way. Even under him,
we didn't have a coin of domestic debt when he left the place. Did we?
Foreign debt. We did. But let me point out what we could have done better, because I was in the engine room.
Yes.
Because when you try and separate politics and economics, you can sort of get into blind spots.
Yes, you're right.
He got the politics horribly wrong. He betrayed the cause.
Yes.
He led us almost into a civil war. He's the one who then, that dynamic led us to the ICC, and that ICC led us to having the current chaps that we have. Okay, so if you look at his legacy, even if you had that spat of growth was less, the recovery
was higher.
No, it was not. It was because of the politics. Even what we could have done to establish a strong base, we did not do.
Fast forward.
Yeah.
Where do you think we are going now?
You see, we've spent the last almost 30 years struggling with a democratic transition. Yeah. Because, we have had many opportunities of laying a foundation.
We will come back to this one. Viewers, we will have a commercial break, and then we'll come back again and listen to Dr. David Ndii. Welcome back, viewers. We will have Dr. Ndii continue with his presentation. Dr. Ndii, you have very intellectually, I would say, given us a rundown of where we came from and where we headed, or where we are now. But I want you to tell it in a layman's language, the kind of debt we have, both internal and external debts that we have today. What are the chances of us being able to service these debts with the kind of economic growth we have in the country? And what is the way forward?
I was just saying before.
Yes, you can finish what you're saying before.
That you don't want to separate your economics and your politics.
Yes.
When people do that, they miss the very important connections between the two. You see, the foundation of the economy is political.
That's why it's called political economy.
No, even a nation. A nation is a political animal. And that's why it's called polity. When we talk about public policy, the word policy comes from politics. It does not come from economics. So your public policies are political things. Okay? So if you don't have a strong political foundation as a nation, any economy you try and build on it is a house of cards. Okay? And what we've tried to do in this country since independence, which is what I said, you've got this political elite, or bourgeois, you talk about post-colonial, which has refused to recognize that you need to build a strong political foundation, an inclusive nation. And they keep thinking that it can produce goodies, yeah, which you keep giving people a patronage system. Which you keep giving people, and it keeps you in power. While you yourself, in the meantime, you're just enjoying the spoils of power. Yeah? It's a culture of,
yes.
That's the thing we talked about. You inherited this colonial economy.
Yes.
They inherited an economy structured for privilege of a few. And they fight over those privileges. They want to preserve those privileges of a few. And to preserve those privileges of a few, you cannot then have an inclusive political system. Because an inclusive political system will demand economic inclusion as well. Yeah. So what you've seen is a struggle, a political struggle, but whose fundamentals are economic. Yeah? And now what has happened is that system, because of other external dynamics, fundamentally population growth, for instance, that system cannot create jobs and opportunities for the millions of young people we have now.
Coming into the market every year.
You have globalization. You don't control many of your economic variables because of globalization. You have technology and information technology. All these young people are now very informed and they have high aspirations. They are educated. There are many political forces and economic forces. And this system, with a small elite which is trying to preserve privilege, I think what we are witnessing is that it has reached the end of the road. So, the indebtedness you are seeing is because you got characters in 2003 who are running for an election for power to save themselves from the ICC as a result of the trajectory, the political trajectory that started with Kibaki.
That's 2013.
2013.
Yes.
The political trajectory that started with Kibaki, which led us to PEV. Because of Kibaki, Kibaki gets elected on an inclusive platform. He gets in there and starts throwing people off the wagon and trying to return the system to a small exclusive elite club, yeah, eating club. Okay, that leads to PEV in 2007 as people are trying to break down the wall. And the disenchantment and all those frustrations, that takes us to ICC. Then you get the circling of the wagons of the Kikuyu and Kalenjin tribes to protect their elites, their elites, and then this gets into office. And now, how do they justify themselves? So they also have to justify their power
by perpetuating the same,
by trying to deliver goodies. How do they deliver these goodies? They go and borrow huge sums of money and mesmerize the people with bullet trains and all manner of sort of things. And those are the things which have ended us where we are. So That's the political economy of it. So if you try and separate the politics and the economics, you are going to miss. You're going to miss where does this huge appetite for debt come from? It is because a system of a political class whose legitimacy is wearing very thin now. They have also to preserve, for them to get into power and protect themselves from the ICC, have entailed really subverting the rule of law and subverting the constitution. Yeah? So the consequence is that the democratic transition we have been struggling with for over 30 years, for almost 30 years, is at the risk of aborting. Yeah? And if you look in Africa, the countries which are doing well economically are the countries which have actually made that transition.
Doing well politically.
The ones which are doing well economically are the countries which have managed to do the democratic transition. The Ghanas, the Senegals, yes. The Cape Verdes I mentioned about,
Botswana and all
the Botswana and all the rest. All Africa's successful countries are successful politically and economically. So this theory people have here, that you can have a benevolent dictatorship, it doesn't work in Africa. It may have worked in Asia for different reasons, but it's not something which can work in societies which are divided as ours, and which are just post-colonial sort of entities.
You went from being a technocrat, an intellectual analyzer of events and policies and systems in the country, from being an economist who was giving serious and very, very necessary advice, whether they were taking those advices or not, to become an active political participant in the last election. What got you into that, and how do you see it in hindsight now after 2017, with the handshake and all that we're saying?
You know, I walked out of politics in 2007. 8. I was very disgusted with what went on and actually left the country for a while.
Yes.
Because I almost got lynched because I went out and after the post-election violence started, I was the first person to go on TV and say that Kibaki had stolen the election and this was going to cause problems.
Seen as a traitor by your community.
I was called a traitor by my community. Personal friends called me to threaten me on the phone.
Yes.
And you saw this, you know, I was looking at people I know, and I could not believe that educated people could behave in what I thought would have been the Hutu extremists,
yes.
would have been like. You know, I saw people I could only call sort of ethnic extremists, what I imagined that Hutu extremists must have been in Rwanda. And it so happened that actually after that I went to Rwanda. and it was frightening to go to Rwanda and see where we could end up.
Yes.
So I sort of stayed out and did my own private things for quite a while, which was quite good because then I was then able to accomplish things which I would have done before and hadn't. And then in 2013, these fellows got into power. And people like me and others, we looked at the landscape and realized that if you looked at the government, it was KANU. If you looked at the opposition, it was KANU.
Yes.
And said, look, if we don't do something, by the next election, this country will be back to KANU. And what we did for those 20 years was all going to be in vain. And that's when we got together and started to ask, what can we do? And it's those conversations that led us...
Got you into NASA, finally.
That got us into NASA, because we realized that for us to, unless we mount another united opposition platform like we did in 2003, then the democratic transition was going to abort.
Lost.
For sure. So our goal in 2017 was to repeat 2003, yeah, with the united opposition, and hopefully
capture power,
get into office, and not repeat
the mistakes of
2003.
Under Kibaki.
Under Kibaki.
Yes.
But we did anticipate that there was a high likelihood that these fellows would steal the election, would not agree
to the results,
to leave office. And as we were approaching the election, it became more and more evident that that could happen.
And did it happen according to you?
Oh, yes, there was a point when we knew for sure that they had no intention of leaving office. And there were channels that communicated that. So when I think the only thing which then surprised us after that was the Supreme Court judgment. That's the only thing that we did not expect.
To say, to
nullify that election.
Yes, yes.
But the that scenario might happen is something that
was not presumed.
We saw as one of our most likely scenarios. So we had to ask, if they do that, what do we do? And we said, we will have to go back to the political trenches and make it very costly for people to steal elections in this country.
So did that happen?
And we did that, yes. I think we made it very costly for them to steal elections. I think in the fullness of time, we will know the impact of what that is.
Are you still in NASA?
Not actively. I think after the handshake, obviously things have evolved in a particular direction. And I actually don't think it's necessary for me to be there.
Were you part of the handshake?
And yes and no. I think that's a bit of a complicated question.
Yes.
We were supportive of the spirit of the handshake. But I am actually quite unhappy with how it has unfolded.
How has it unfolded?
You see, if you read the document let's call it the handshake document. Let me back up just a little bit. We had said very clearly that our fundamental problem and our fundamental issue was electoral justice. Yeah? And the thing that we needed to resolve with Jubilee was the 2017 election fiasco. Remember, Jubilee kept saying that they are willing to talk, but only talk about development. And we said we are willing to talk, but we are only willing to talk about the election.
Electoral justice.
That was the position. And the roadmap to electoral justice, we were very clear what it is. Okay? But we articulated our position. It was structured negotiation. The thing we were going to put on the table, we knew what it was. The handshake was a rabbit out of the hat.
It came as a surprise.
It came as a surprise.
You are not party to it.
We knew that there was back channels. We always had back channels.
Yes.
The issue was not whether there are back channels and there was a handshake or not, but what was the process that was going to follow. What was the deal?
What has followed?
And what was going to follow. So our expectation was that we were going to then have the opportunity to put our electoral justice agenda on the table. Okay?
Does it look like now it's going to be ever fun?
It became readily apparent. It does not even now. So we started pushing in that direction of putting the electoral justice agenda on the table. There was a lot of pushback. Yeah? Both from some of people on our side.
From NASA?
Yes.
From Rila?
From Rila team, and as well as from
Uhuru.
So they were on the same side.
And you were on a
pushing
different side.
back against
electoral justice.
Okay?
So you would safely say that Rila betrayed the cause?
I wouldn't say so. Because they say time will tell.
Yes.
Because
but you're disappointed?
No, for the following reason. We don't know what the private agreement, because there's a private treaty.
Between the two?
Between the two. They have not disclosed to anybody what it is.
there has been an acrimony between the two families for a very long time, right from independence until today.
So, yeah.
So why would you fault a private
I am
treaty
giving
in which
I am giving it the benefit of the doubt
Yes, yes.
that in there
Yes.
there may be electoral justice,
So
but they are going about it differently.
In the two families barring their differences for all these years, and because Jaramogi felt he was betrayed by Kenyatta, and Rila, he is here feeling he's aggrieved he should have won the elections of 2007, or of course that now is for the wider Kikuyu, and 2013 and 2017. So would it not be a good thing if we can bring a closure to the differences between the two families, and then we now begin handling and dealing with the wider national issues?
I have no problem with that. Yes. In fact, if you read the handshake document,
yes.
They have said very clearly
Yes.
that acknowledged that their fathers,
Yes.
and they say our fathers,
Yes.
Made some mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah, they did always whatever. So that's the acknowledging, and we want this history of acrimony
To be corrected.
to end with us.
Yes.
The language they have used
To end with us.
to end with us. We do not want to pass on this to the next generation. Now, they also say in that document that they accept that our problems are not institutional reform or constitution. We have done a lot of that. Our problems are of a political nature, and we commit to lead a process that will begin to resolve those problems. Said, if you people, both of you, take responsibility for these historical political grievances, and you are prepared, and you have sort of to correct them, and you're going to lead the process, and then ride into the sunset, I think we are prepared to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I said that publicly.
What do you think about it now?
I don't see it. Because once the pushback on electoral justice began to happen, and the whole process of creating this Bridges initiative became sort of bureaucratic rigmarole, it became doubtful.
So it turned out to be a private treaty between the two.
It turned out to be what, and I have posed this question, asked, is this an electoral justice agreement, dealing with 2017, or is it a succession deal for 2022? I have posed that question because I need to know. Because if it's still an electoral justice issue for resolving 2017, I'm interested. I'm a stakeholder in that. If it is a private deal about 2022, where Rila will become Uhuru's project, I'm not interested in that.
When we were, as NASA, we had a committee. What was that committee? Our committee that was working out the modalities of ending up with a single candidate,
yes,
NASA candidates.
Yes. It was, we had the national, what is it called?
I can't remember the name, but it was a national committee basically.
The parties.
Of the parties.
Yeah, we had the summit.
The constituent parties.
Then we had you guys.
Yes.
And then we had us as the technical team for that.
You were the technocrat, head of the technical team.
Yep.
And literally one of the most focused and vociferous persons in there. You even dominated us, the politicians, in the manner in which we finally came up with a candidate.
Well, that's a story for another day. Yeah?
It's a story for another day.
Yeah.
But at that time, if you remember very well,
yeah,
our understanding was that whether he loses or he wins, regardless, this would be the last shot for Raila Odinga.
Yes.
What happened? Is he still a candidate?
That's my point.
Yes.
Let me say, when we were thinking about...
But if you look at his own constituency right now, including the folks who were with us in that meeting, James Zerengo and the rest, that was the position. But now they are saying that Raila is the next president.
Now, that's my point. Let me tell you, our thinking at the time, when we are not talking about if we have a negotiation with Jubilee around electoral justice, what will the settlement, the political settlement, look like? And the political settlement that we had in mind was a transitional government.
Yes.
And that transitional government would do electoral reforms.
reform all institutions in the country. Literally.
Especially political institutions.
Yes, yes,
because the problem is
yes,
political.
Yes.
The Electoral Commission, we would probably restructure the executive because the presidency is what keeps creating us these problems. The zero-sum sort of presidency.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
winner takes all.
yes,
winner
takes all. Rila and Uhuru would midwife that process in the transitional government. In 2022,
we'll have a free.
they would referee. They would be referees, so they would not be candidates. If they agreed to be referees, they'll be leaving a legacy of political stability. Okay? That
doesn't look like now.
That is what we thought the solution should be. Okay?
Were you party to the swearing in of Raila Odinga?
Yes, I was.
And you were party to the fact that it was going to be called the People's President.
Yes.
Which essentially did not have any constitutional underpinnings, but basically it means the man who is out there as a popular guy and every Kenyan is going to respect him as the people the Kenyans chose, but does not have any constitutional power and authority.
Yes.
So you did not intend to challenge the authority at the time.
If you recall, and I'll tell you, there were two schools with us on the swearing in.
Yes.
And this was in the protest movement.
Yes.
There was one bunch of people who are advocating swearing in as a power grab.
And paralyze the country, basically.
No, power grab, the sort of thing that, and they were using the examples of Yaya Jammeh, you know, the current president of Gambia, Barrow,
Yes.
The way he swore himself in, he was sworn in and supported by external actors to take power.
Yes.
So there were people who saw it as a power thing. We'll whatever, and then find a way of forcing this government out. Through all sorts of international pressure and all those sort of things.
There's that school of thought.
There's that school of thought.
Yes.
Then there was a school of thought that it's an act of civil disobedience.
Yes.
And I was of the civil disobedience school, which is what you are describing.
Yes.
And you said, even after we did it, I remember I went on air one day and I said, you see, Uhuru can keep State House.
Yes.
He'll own State House
we'll own the
and we'll own the streets and the people.
Absolutely.
We are not going to challenge state authority.
Yes.
But we are going to take away the legitimacy.
Paralyze the country when we want.
No, we don't even want to paralyze it.
But that's how it turned out to be.
We will just suck out political legitimacy out of it.
Yes.
So that it is an illegitimate institution. It is the illegitimate institution it has always been.
And that's the one which finally...
And that's the one which finally carried the day.
Yes.
And that's why we said we must do it in Uhuru Park with 1 million people. The other people are prepared to do it in Tanzania, I don't know where. They were prepared to go and do it and film it.
This was going to be the Barrow.
That's the
Barrow one.
Yeah.
You go in another place and then the pressure is going to force out Uhuru or people who were in the State House that time. This other one was basically to bring State House back to its own senses.
No.
Uhuru and the government.
No.
Jubilee.
No. This was actually to begin to think about setting up a different political system.
So challenge the power at the center.
No. As I said, my view is that when we actually, remember this was anchored in the Constitution.
So then how practically were you, what was the practical steps that you intended to do to force a change?
No, you don't force change.
You allow them to rule for the 5 years.
Not even 5 years.
Yes.
One day, you asked me about Nyerere.
Yes.
If Kenya is to survive, one day, the people of Kenya will have to sit down and constitute a nation and a
we don't have a nation now.
That works for them.
Finally, referendum. Let's talk of referendum.
Yeah.
Different views on this referendum. A section that includes me believe that this constitution as it is very expensive. It's a good constitution, there's no doubt about that. But we have had it in practice, operationalized for the last 6 years, 7 years. we're in a position right now to reflect on it and see the areas that we need to change. And that government outside parliament does not seem to work that well. We want members of parliament to become ministers. That the county governments are far too many. There's need to limit them to viable numbers, 15, 16, 14, whatever. That there are too many elected, the government wage bill is very high, and it has to be mitigated. We need to reduce that because you have too many people who are working, and you need to have a lean, mean, effective civil service both at the county levels as well as the center. There's been too much corruption at the center, and that corruption itself has also been devolved to the periphery. There has to be a constitution that deals more effectively with it. And then there's other school of thought that feels Kenya has got this winner take all is not good for us. So all the communities, at least the major communities, have got to be reflected in the power, in the power setting itself, or the power chart. So we need to have a ceremonial president. We need to have 2 vice presidents who are ceremonial. We need to have a prime minister, 2 deputy prime ministers, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, tell me, you might have a view different from those 2. Tell me what's your view on this. And do we have to have a referendum? And if it's yes, why do we need to have a referendum?
If you go back to our manifesto,
yes,
it says on the first page that we are the party of the Constitution. We are the coalition of the Constitution.
Yes.
Our election platform was the Constitution.
Yes.
To make those amendments.
Indeed.
Okay? So we ran on that platform.
The NASA platform.
Yes. We said these people are against the Constitution. These people are the no, Jubilee. Remember, they were no.
Yes.
So we say even where it has been implemented, it's reluctant. So we say we want to come to power because we are the people of the Constitution, and we embrace the Constitution, and even where there are kinks, we are going to fix them. We propose to fix them. You go to a manifesto, the Constitution is the first item. It's governance. So you are preaching to them. Those people who are saying that Constitution needs to be a few changes and things and to be looked at are preaching to the choir. If you read the book we did with Rila or for Rila before the election, again it articulates that agenda. Okay? But it's a red herring, because that's not the problem that got us here. That's something we could have done if we come to election. The problem that got us here was the 2017 election. Okay? So, when we spoke of a referendum,
electoral injustice, yes.
When we spoke of a referendum, yeah, we were talking about a referendum at the time. We were talking about a referendum to create a constitutional instrument, because you can't do it without a constitution, for the transitional government I have just talked about, in which Uhuru and Rila would midwife a new electoral order.
And not be interested parties.
And not be interested parties.
Other than legacy.
Other than legacy.
Yes.
Now, they have shifted the goalposts, and they are now talking about a wholesale review of the Constitution.
Self-centered, in your opinion?
It is self-serving, it is opportunistic, and the only thing it can do is preserve the status quo. Because their fundamental problem now, collectively, the entire political class, is self-preservation.
Dr. David Ndii, I know one interview is not sufficient, not enough, for us to share with the rest of the country. We've already had our opportunities ourselves to share a lot. In the many years we've known one another.
That's true.
But we share with the rest of the country the wisdom and the intellectual capacity that you have, and which is, in my opinion, one of the things we're very proud of, to have such kind of a, what you call knowledge capital in the country.
Thank you.
Whether people listen to you or not. But now, can you give your closing remarks? And if you want to address Kenyans, address them. But give us your closing remarks.
I think my own sense, I think obviously Kenyans out there want hope.
The hope is there.
They want hope.
Yes.
And the question is, where is the hope? I think what we're seeing now is that the political system is clarifying. We can see these people, what they stand for, all of them. They've shown their true colors. They are for themselves.
That's a political class.
As a political class. A system for the few.
Unfortunately, I'm also included in that political class.
No, but what will happen? There are many people. What we've had, even I myself, we've been part of it.
Yes.
But there's been a lot of gray areas.
Yes, yes.
You know, so that you can't tell the difference between people and ideas, especially ideas, because what now this I think gives us an opportunity to do is to actually develop a true political alternative to this political class, to its ideology of developmentalism.
Paradigm shift.
Paradigm, not just paradigm shift. We need new politics of nation building, not politics of development. So these people stand for politics of development, which is basically patronage and lacking
goodies, corruption.
Yeah, whatever. A dysfunctional sort of culturally dislocated political system. We need authentic politics.
Yes.
How are we going to live together as disparate communities which were brought together by harmoniously and inclusive governance, you know, how we govern, how we're going to hold our leaders, all that sort of stuff. These people, every time you go there, they don't want that. They start talking development, blah, blah, blah. We don't have time for this, the other. So I think it's clarifying.
As part of your closing remarks,
yeah.
I think Kenyans will ask me, if I do not ask you this question, what is the cost of corruption to our national economy? As an economist, the leading economist we have in this part of of sub-Saharan Africa.
I think it's fundamentally the reason why we are poor. Corruption is the reason
why we're poor.
Because what we have is a predatory elite and state. They control the state that preys on the people. We probably would not be very rich because there are other factors why African countries have struggled with economic development. But I can tell you, it is possible even now with the resources we have and the economy that we have for the vast majority of Kenyans to live vastly better lives.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. David Ndii. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure there's going to be more interviews in which you're going to address Kenyans with your wealth of knowledge and experience. Viewers, this is the end of our program or our show today on Speakers Gallery. Thank you.